Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. He's your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. I have a great guest for today. I have Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. He is the president of Project Sentinel and the London Center for Policy Research, contributor over at Newsmax, author of Operation Darkheart, and host of The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer. Lieutenant Colonel, how are you?
I'm doing well, Nick. Thank you. Happy New Year, and I always enjoy joining you for these discussions.
Well, Happy New Year to you too. Glad you're coming back. And I have to ask right off the bat, the curious case of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin goes missing for a week, doesn't tell the White House that he's undergoing cancer treatments and that there's a complication. Your thoughts on that?
So, look, as I always have to say, full disclosure, I know Lloyd Austin. Operation Darkheart, you mentioned Darkheart, he's in it. He was the commander of Task Force CGTF 180 when I worked for him. He signed my Bronze Star. I can't complain too much about that. What I can complain about is his actions and activities since he left that job back in 2004. He has been a Secretary of Defense is about as bad as you can get. His first act as Secretary of Defense was to order a review of radicalization and white supremacy in the military. And that report came out over the holidays, by the way. It was conducted by IDA, by the Institute for Defense Analysis. And it was tasked in I guess it was February of 2021, right after they came in. It was a year-long study, June 2021 to June of 2022, full year, very in-depth by a completely independent organization. And the conclusion, Nick, was unfounded. There was unfounded concerns about radicalization. It's out and available now. And they dumped it over the holidays. So about the time he's getting his prostate taken care of, they're dumping this bad news report. So related, I don't know. But I'm just saying that there is no radicalization, there's no white supremacy in the military based on this review. As a matter of fact, the review actually said the actual search for this radicalization may be causing radicalization because you can't define what it is you're looking for. This is Lloyd Austin. So,
less extremism in the military than in the regular civilian population. I mean, it really was stunning that we have the most professional military force on the face of this planet, and yet we're accusing them of being extremists.
So that very thing of accusing them falsely creates extremism because you use really like vague language, like what does this really even mean? So anyway, so fast forward, and this is incidental. This was released incidental to Lloyd Austin's magical mystery tour wherever he went, and so I'm just saying there's some issues here that need to be sorted through. So let's just talk about him himself and his ethics. Not since the beginning of the Cold War, not since we created our nuclear enterprise, have we had a SecDef go missing. Now, for your audience to know, I know these things because I've worked at that level. I've advised people at that level. I've had dinner with them over in Quarter 16 on Fort Myer, where you have the strategic staff of the U.S. military. They're hanging out. I've been to Mark Milley's house, although I wasn't invited in. Just saying, I've been to the house next to it, I was invited in. So,
did he lecture you about white rage?
Well, I was wondering about those high heels on his doorstep, but let's not go down that path. But my point being is that every one of those senior cabinet level positions, Nick, are not 15 minutes don't go by without some level of checking on a big board. You remember Dr. Strangelove? They have the big board. They got those things for senior leaders. I'm not joking. Any senior leader that is has statutory authorities based on the Constitution or the Congress, they are tracked down to 15-minute intervals, 15 minutes. And so if something happens, if something goes wrong, all hell breaks loose, literally. I've seen this happen, and several folks have been talking about this in the media, where if a principal goes down, is injured or otherwise somehow taken and detained or out of the loop, things happen instantly. So the first question is, why didn't the system that's been established since the beginning of the Cold War catch this glitch? Why didn't this come up as an issue when this guy went into the hospital for it sounds like surgery which required more than a bit of local anesthesia? Just saying,
Yeah. When you go to
I
ICU, it's not something that's just routine.
yeah. And then secondly, why weren't the normal processes of human beings being observed where they have dialogues? Like you and I are talking, we're going to be talking about some stuff I would have thought Joe Biden would be reaching out to talk to Lloyd Austin about over the holidays. Like, hey, SecDef, I'm really concerned about this strike. Is this strike going to be sufficient for what we need to do to do? No, none of that. John Kirby's explanation is, well, we gave direction and it was carried out. Really? Really? You're just like giving orders and hoping for the best? Is that a strategy? And that's what he said yesterday. Or I should say last week, when John Kirby presented his information last week at his press conference to try to explain this away, he basically said, oh, yeah, we gave direction and we talked.
And the undersecretary was ready to fulfill the role if anything were to happen, yet the undersecretary was actually on vacation in Puerto Rico.
So, and I've made this point a couple of times, like, okay, say things go wrong with the elective surgery, which is really not elective. It's critical. It's critical surgery. And first off, the president should have been told, like, hey, this is surgery. It's not expected to go wrong, but it might, and be aware. So the first thing you do then is you get your deputy in beforehand and you brief him. Hey, I'm going to be indisposed. I don't like being indisposed, but you're in charge while I'm out. You do that. It's just, I've been in command, Nick. I've commanded and led several organizations. I know how to do pass downs or temporary delegations. I know I've been an acting division commander at one point since everybody was out and I had to take over a division. I've been acting director of operations for all of clandestine or all of human intelligence for DIA at one point because I was designated. These things happen all the time. So the question becomes, why did Miss Hicks, Miss Hicks, who was down in Puerto Rico, why didn't they just do the movie thing, Nick? Send an airplane down and pick her up. It's happened to me. Colonel Shaffer, we need to talk to you. Get in the car. We have to take you somewhere. This does happen in real life. And they should have done it to her. It's like, go down wherever she's at, get her, send a helicopter. Why do we have $800 billion defense if you can't actually send an airplane and a helicopter for someone when you need it, for God's sake? Seriously. Happens all the times in the movies. And it should have happened here because the moment he became incapacitated, his chief of staff should have said, we have a problem. We need to get somebody here right now because and this is my issue, there are statutory requirements for certain classes of weapons that only the SecDef has authority to release, period. He and the president, nuclear weapons, the nuclear weapons enterprise, it's very tightly controlled, and you don't mess around with that. So the fact is that apparently, and I've said this publicly, the appearance was for about 3 to 5 days, nobody was at the nuclear switch, and nobody knew how to get to it if we had to.
It really is crazy when you think about the totality of the Secretary Austin saga. But Tony, we need to take a quick break. So when we get back, I want to ask you about how the cabinet views this president, because I'm seeing something very ominous out there. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. When things go sideways, you want to be prepared. Protect you and your family. And people are concerned. They might have to go for a long time without food, electricity. That's why I want to introduce you to 4patriots.com. Get preparedness products you could use now, and that could save your life later. My favorite is 4Patriots' new solar generator, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. It uses the endless free power of the sun to power your lights, your TV, medical equipment, even run your fridge. Plus, it's expandable and comes with a free solar panel. Or you can pick up one of 4Patriots' best-selling survival food kits. Delicious tasting and designed to last for 25 years. They even have kits with real meat. And if the power's out, no worries. Just boil water over fire, simmer, and serve. You're going to enjoy a hot meal and stay safe in a crisis. More smart people than ever are finding 4Patriots. Over 2 million customers trust them, and you might have even seen them on TV. I had the folks at 4Patriots set up a special page for you at 4patriots.com/PAS so that listeners of this podcast can see this week's discounts and deals before they go away. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS, but you gotta hurry because the deals don't last long. So save more money, get peace of mind, and protect you and your family. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS. Welcome back, everyone. So the Lloyd Austin issue, it's illustrative of something much bigger going on with this administration. Do you think that it's the incompetence of the administration and it's just simply amateur hour with these people in charge? Or do you think something more is going on, that maybe the people that work for this president, they just don't have any regard for him? They view him as a shell of himself. What are your thoughts on this?
So let's start with the last first, Shell. I don't think anybody, well, nobody wants to talk to Joe Biden because I don't think they know what they're going to get. It's like Forrest Gump and a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And I think unfortunately, as much as I'm making light of it, I think that's how bad Biden is at this point. I think if they walk in and talk to him, they could get direction to microwave tapioca or nuke the Soviets. Who knows? I mean, that's how random I think the direction. So that's why they isolate him. But that from that isolation then becomes delay. There's always a delay of response. There's never anticipatory actions by this government. It's always responding. And they hide this through the process of trying to set up all these meetings. Oh, we have the deputies meeting. We have this process. We have that process. Well, all it tells me is they're managing by committee and they're not able to respond adequately. They're constantly on send and they're not keeping Biden in the loop because Biden shouldn't be in a loop because he's a loop. He's loopy. So that's why. So then you go to who's in charge. Tony Blinken is probably the worst. I encourage people to go out and watch. It's on my Twitter feed. Go out and watch his assessment of their success from last year. According to him, they are showing the most amazing leadership ever of the United States, leading the world into great things. And you and I both know it could not be farther from the truth. That's how delusional he is. I mean, it's like crazy stuff here.
But do they really believe people buy this BS? I mean, I guess there is a large segment of society that will buy this BS after watching everyone's reaction with COVID. But, it really is amazing. It's like, don't believe what you see.
My next point is this is all about managing the narrative. It's not about managing circumstance or anticipating events. It's about managing the narrative that they can control. It's all about control. They can only control the narrative. That's what they control. And it's all about, to your point, Nick, domestic politics. This is all focused and shaped for the political Democrat audience, trying to convince them that Biden should be supported. They should enthusiastically work to reelect him. And that he's basically trying to sit the fence between the Hamas caucus, those extreme, very vocal folks on the left, AOC, Tlaib, all these others, and of course the more traditional progressive Democrats who are into the religion of climate change and things like that. So they're basically trying to convince the blue hairs and the radicals that everything is fine and they're actually doing a great job. So it's about domestic politics ultimately. That's what they're doing this for. So when you put it all together, their actions, the Biden administration's actions are completely separate from the real world. There's no link. And I think the more that link becomes disparate, the more our adversaries are probably going to consider doing more things. Like the Iranians already figured it out and they're doing it. So,
Well, you're a student of international relations. So when we examine the international landscape, we've seen China become much more aggressive, particularly towards Taiwan, South China Seas, Philippines. We've seen Iran become much more aggressive. There's zero doubt about that. Russia's much more aggressive, invaded Ukraine. We're seeing a destabilization within Serbia.
Right.
We're seeing even parts of Northern Ireland. It's a very tenuous situation there. We see Ecuador, all hell's breaking loose.
Right.
We see the migrant caravans, just the unending flow of migrants into the United States. Do you think that the increase in worldwide international instability is directly linked to when President Biden took office, when we look at all the things that have transpired since he's taken office?
Yeah, I think so. And here's why. I am not a neocon. Just let me state that right up front. I am not a neocon. I do not believe in the overwhelming and continued use of U.S. military forces as a tool of foreign policy. I believe, much like the Reagan, I'm a Reagan guy. I'm still friends with Ed Meese. I was mentored by Bud McFarlane. I came up through their system, and I love them all. They're great people, and their desire for a world which was essentially stable by the fact that we had commerce and exchange of goods and basically a growing global economy is kind of how to keep things going. People who can trade with each other, engage in commerce, tended to get along better. And I think that was the path that Trump really did want us on. I worked with his economic folks all the time, and Trump saw that the link between national security and economic success was completely and intimately linked. Biden doesn't. And so while I'm not for us using military power, I'm for us being helpful. If we can secure lines of communication, lines of trade, we should do that. We should allow for the world to prosper on its own terms, not dictated by us. But for better or for worse, we are the stabilizing influence. We are that which exists to help kind of keep the world going in a positive direction. In absence, nature abhors a vacuum, Nick. You know that. I mean, in absence of leadership, things are going to go in ways we don't necessarily appreciate, and that's what's happening. So I talk to folks all the time who are involved in national security, both international and national, and yeah, we have a complete detachment from what we used to do as a nation under Trump, especially, to engage and help and try to work with governments. Some we like, some we don't. I mean, it's not always rainbows and unicorns with the people we deal with. But the idea is that stability, usually exercised through governance, through some level of governance somewhere, helps bring the world in a positive direction. So without our essentially being there to be helpful, to be essentially a partner with folks, that all tends to fall apart. And again, I'm not a neocon. I don't believe that we should be out there. And I'm opposing any additional funding on Ukraine till we figure out what the hell we're trying to accomplish. All these other things, which I do believe that we should be involved in. I just don't believe that the Biden administration has the smarts to do it. And I think everybody else has figured it out too.
Well, and isn't that the problem with the United States? So you just brought up Ukraine. I mean, the Biden administration never came out and laid out smart objectives that are simple, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Never stated what is the actual purpose. That's why support is at an all-time low. It's why people like you and I are going to question all these billions of dollars going over there, because there is no strategy. But there's no strategy with anything. And, when you go to bed at night, does it make you rest easy that the person in charge, President Biden, may be the one that's leading us right into a World War III situation, and maybe the commander in chief at the start? I mean, you just said you don't want to see us get engaged in wars, but isn't it true that when you have weak leadership, sometimes you're sucked into these things because of that weak leadership?
You do. And I think the very fact that Biden is seen as weak, not only by us, but others, is that which we'll continue to see. You just listed through all the different folks and places that are essentially going off the rails right now. And yeah, because there's no belief that there's any real effort to do it. And I want to make 2 points on it. Well, let me go back to the one about Ukraine real quick. I had to drive this morning to the vet. I had to drop my cat off to the vet. And as I was driving back, I mapped to listen to NPR, And by the way,
I feel for you.
You're an academic. Maybe you could help me on this. Can you complain to NPR? Because every time I hear stories, my eyes roll and I almost drive off the road. I mean, every time it's like, oh my God, is that? And it's like I'm always like rolling my eyes and I can't focus on driving because it's so loony most of the time. Just saying. I mean, I don't know what they drink over there. With that said, as I'm driving today listening to NPR, one of their guys from Georgetown comes on and says, yeah, we're spending over half of our annual budget is defense spending. And we have no grand strategy. Think about this. This is the lefties now saying, yeah, we're spending all this money and we really don't know why. And this has been my issue for a decade. Since you and I have been talking, I've said we need an effective defense, not an expensive defense. And there are legacy programs. There's all sorts of fat that could be cut. But no, we don't want to cut that because some congressman in North Dakota is going to complain about it. It's insane. It's an insane way to do it. They always grow at 7% per year. It's like, who? Do you get a 7% pay increase every year, Nick? I'm sure you wish you did.
I certainly wish I did. But
you don't.
Not only that, when you factor in Bidenomics, I'm actually losing money each and every year. My pay is actually going down when I factor in the economy.
So that's my point. Pentagon never takes a haircut. Other things never take it, but we do, and we're expected to just suck it up. So that's my point, is that we have an overall defense enterprise that's completely out of control. And I argued with a guy named Jim Mattis over this back when Jim was my advisor when we were doing something called Team B for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Mattis and I would go back and forth on this. I remember one day I was driving to Capitol Hill for a meeting, and he called me up out of the blue, and he didn't appreciate my pressuring the team, which consisted of Reagan and Clinton, former national security experts, to include my friend Jim Woolsey and others. And he basically was saying, well, I don't agree that we need a grand strategy. It's like, well, what do you mean, General? You don't agree with me. It's something that it's a unifying factor that we need to examine relating to the overall direction of the enterprise. And next thing you know, Jim Mattis is the sec def, and he doesn't no grand strategy. So I'm just saying that many of us have recognized the lack of focus in an overall direction of that. Because I'm a Reagan guy. Reagan had a strategy: beat the Soviets, just do it. And it was pretty simple. But hey, let's go kick their ass. Not literally, but let's use all these other methods to win. And we did. So that's my fundamental. That's my basic belief based on the success of that strategy. You need to have something that unifies the direction of the enterprise. If you don't, it literally will. Well, it's like the Blob. Remember that old movie with Steve McQueen, The Blob? It just kind of goes out there and just covers everything. That's what they do. And I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's economic, and I don't think it creates a strong defense. So that's one point. Secondly, relating to Ukraine, as you said, we went in there and we're just giving this, and every time they've said something, I've said it's not going to work. And it's not because I'm a Putin guy. Putin's a thug. We spent time and resources to beat him during the Cold War, which I just referenced. So, oh yeah, we're just, the M1 tanks, it's not going to work. Oh, the Leopards, no, it's not going to work. Fundamentally, it's a numbers game, Nick. The numbers were never there. I've said over a year and a half, there's no way the Ukrainians will prevail based on the existing number of the existing and available manpower of the Russians. Period. It's not going to happen. And then you actually send them off on this offensive, and in the summer of last year with no aviation support. Come on. Dave Petraeus out there. Oh, I have hopes with this. Dave Petraeus is either compromised or an idiot, because no one in their right mind tries to go through 4 layers of defense, Nick, well thought, full of landmines, overseen with drones. Nobody sends infantry into that. Come on. I mean, this is how stupid it was. And yet somehow, we have hopes. 50-50 chance. Yeah. That's the Biden administration. Aspirational thinking is policy.
Well,
sorry, you got me going.
Well, that's part of the problem, that they have this idealistic view, and base policy on how they want things to be rather than a realist view and the way reality is. Unfortunately, this has had a detrimental impact. You spoke about the military budget, and I think the lack of a grand strategy that unifies us is indicative of the entirety of the United States right now, that there's nothing that's unifying us because we don't have the leadership. But Milton Friedman warned that you can't have open borders in a welfare state. Well, you can't have open borders, a welfare state, a military-industrial complex, and then a $34 trillion debt. I mean, It really shows our weakness. When it comes to the military, one of my major concerns is how our military is actually not ready for anything anymore. So 2 polls. The first poll says that 75% of current and retired or veteran are not going to advise their children joining the military, that they're not going to tell them that it's a good career option. Now, this is something that we've never seen. I mean, the military is sustained through generational people joining up and enlisting. So first poll, what's your thoughts on that?
So I retired back in 2011, and in my little speech I did in Representative Walter Jones' office, I retired in his office, and I said then, the military today is not the military I joined in 1981, and that was 13 years ago. So it's only gotten worse. The military I saw back then was going down this path of what we now call political correctness to a degree which was unheard of, and now it's inculcated. Let me give you an example. I was the guy that was I was in charge of the 94th Division's reactivation, one of Patton's divisions, one of my last duties, as I was the G6, the communications officer of a U.S. Army division, 94th Division. And in the ceremony, I was supposed to be the adjutant. And at the last minute, because I was white, I was removed from the ceremony because we had to have a black person be the adjutant. And this was just the beginning. It's like, okay, this is going to be bad. And it got worse. So the idea of merit being the basis for a selection and promotion was already going out the window. It's like, okay, well, yes, Colonel Shaffer, you did a great job planning, and you brought the old guard and did all these great things, but you're fired because your skin is not the right color. Think about
Imagine what it's like in academia right now.
I know. So that's what I'm saying.
But you can't become the president.
It's only gotten worse. So the people who you would expect to join, people like me who have kids. By the way, my kids aren't going to join. They've gone off in different directions. God bless them. One's a fireman and medic. He wanted to serve, just not in the military. People like me are not encouraging it. and then also, where do you get people from? You get people from the Midwest. You have a lot of folks, both multiple. Doesn't skin color doesn't matter. You get them from the Midwest. You get people from the heartland who have faith in God and country. And if you have a military that does not share your values, why are you going to join? Then, oh, by the way, you send people over into harm's way. You get 120 attacks and 3 responses. We've got a guy right now as we speak in Fort Liberty, Fort Bragg, in critical condition, an aviator, because he was hit in one of the attacks. Nobody wants to talk about it. Yeah, we have people who are being harmed. I don't know if he's going to survive. So this is what's going on. So you see this lack of response. Why would you want to go serve? These are all the factors that people, I think, have to consider. So, and they don't. And I think the survey is correct. People just aren't encouraging, and they aren't signing up. And that's why you have the lowest level of recruitment and manpower since from 50 plus years.
The recruitment numbers are abysmal, and the numbers aren't just down, they're shockingly down. And we keep lowering the standards, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, and there's another poll I want to bring to your attention, and we're going to discuss it when we get back from this quick break. Welcome back, everyone. So, Lieutenant Colonel, there's another poll I want to get your thoughts on. It's about battlefield readiness. Is America ready to deploy anywhere in the world and fight a war on a moment's notice? According to this poll, 40% of generals believe that the United States is battlefield ready. That means that 60% believe we're not. That's concerning to me. But even more concerning to me is that 18% of warrant officers feel that we are battlefield ready. And the reason I think that this number is even more important is because it's the warrant officers that are the ones that lead troops into battle. Sometimes generals could be detached. So what's your thoughts about this poll?
This goes back to my comment regarding being relieved and not put into a ceremony based on skin color. I think many folks have recognized that within a system that used to be based on merit and professional conduct, mostly. I mean, you always have politics in a system. Come on, Nick, there's always politics. But in the case of what we're talking about here, I think there's real issues about how we would perform on the battlefield. When I was a very young lieutenant, I was sent right into things. I remember being deployed to Germany, Reforger, 1985, January, February. And we were exercising like we were going to go to war. And I swear to God, we were ready. And that focus on professional conduct and readiness was something I came to admire, and it's my standard. It's like you fight as if you're going to go to war. We don't have that now. I think so many of the leaders we have at the tactical level simply are not encouraged to essentially seek and accomplish those things which are necessary to achieve victory, even at the unit level, because they become so focused on feelings. Oh, did I hurt your feelings? Did I make you get up at 5:30 a.m. and
drill sergeants can't yell anymore because it's too offensive.
I know. I yell. I yell all the time, and But I'm just saying that the standards of conduct at the tactical level where the rubber meets the road, I have a lot of concerns about. I'm not sure we could function as a military if we had to at this point. We've been fighting counterinsurgencies for the past 20 years, and a counterinsurgency has barely any relationship to a peer, near peer or peer on peer conflict. And I've been going back and looking at history, looking at World War II, looking at the run up to it, what it took. Omar Bradley once very famously said, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. And we're not talking logistics. We're not talking about how we could actually bring the best and the brightest in it all at once to achieve a series of victories against a peer. So it's a very difficult position to be in, I think.
And at a time, so morale's at an all-time low. We have our military readiness is down. Soldiers aren't ready. Recruitment levels, targets we're not hitting. We have weapon stockpiles that have been depleted. And at the same time, you have these conflicts that are raging in the world, particularly Israel doing what it needs to do against Hamas in Gaza.
Right.
Are you concerned that is expanding and is jumping its borders, perhaps bring Hezbollah from Lebanon into this? We're seeing the Red Sea attacks on shipping lanes. We're seeing attacks on a military base throughout the Middle East. Are you concerned that this is going to spiral out of control and may suck us into this conflict?
Yes, I do, because the original premise of our conversation is our adversaries reacting to Joe Biden's weakness, perceived weakness, and this is an extension of that. So going back to circle the square on two things we talked about already, the Biden administration is not willing to do the hard and appropriate things to support the Israelis because of the Hamas caucus within the Democrat Party.
And can you just tell the audience, what is the proper strategy to prevent this from actually expanding, to prevent this from turning into a much larger conflict?
Strength. So I'm not a neocon, but at this point, after you've been hit over 100 times by Iranian proxies, it's time to hit back and hit back hard. Within a 48-hour period, Nick, at a time of our choosing, we could take out Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi leadership and their logistical trains, and just wipe them off the planet to make a point. And that's what point I would make at this point. I would go after their leadership, because not all of Hamas's leadership is in the Gaza. Just saying. And I would say
the billionaires living in Qatar.
So I'm just saying that as a matter of policy, I do know kind of what we can do. Not that I jump into that often. I'm just saying that if I knew what we could do, I would actually have us go out within a 48-hour period and just knock out everything. Just say, don't knock it off. If you do it again, we're going to go closer, because right now we could do it on the periphery without having to go right into Iran to remind them all.
And I just want to put an exclamation point on that. The former president, you had President Trump. Iran shoots down a $1 billion American drone. President Trump says, don't do it again. But I'm going to tell you what, you harm one single American. If one American dies under my watch, under my leadership, you're going to pay a price. Then it turns out an American was killed, and Soleimani gets drones a few months later. Did we hear anything from Iran after that? No, they made the threats, we'll get our revenge. But Iran calmed down after that. So just to put an exclamation point on the idea of strength.
Yeah, they're a bully. And you hit a bully in the nose, they're going to back off. They're going to talk big, and it's like, yeah, whatever. And that's what I'm saying. And Nick, we can still do that. So while I am concerned about our ability to do certain things, special operations forces, U.S. Air Forces are able to do amazing things within the context of what we can ask them to do. So at this point, I would order that strike. I would order a massive, overwhelming 48-hour offensive. I call it something, I don't know, call it something like Houthi Toothy, Operation Houthi Toothy, and just take them all out and be done with it. But until you show strength, at this time, if we're talking again this next month, it'll be 200 strikes with 5 responses, because that's what the Biden brand brings: failure. So
that's concerning, to say the least. And as far as Ukraine goes, do you think it's time that we put forward a negotiated settlement, engage in diplomatic talks to end that conflict?
All along the line of engagement, the Russians now have the potential to return to the offensive. They're not. They're sitting back. They're implementing a term which others call it. I call it this, but it's not my term. Of aggressive defense, aggressive, basically aggressive attrition, as I think the term's being used in Europe. And I think that's an apt and correct description of what they're doing. Putin has said, as well as everybody else under him, that they don't want to continue to kill Ukrainians, but they will if they keep sending them their way, and they're blaming us. People, this is the other thing, Nick. People need to go look at what's being said by the Russians and Russian media. Now, right now, as a policy, I'm not going on RT, or I'm not going on any Ukrainian or Russian media, because I don't want anything I say to be taken out of context. With that said, people should go to the original source. People tend to forget that Putin's approval rate right now is 80%. 8 in 10 people like what he's doing.
But hasn't that always been our problem, that Americans never look at the culture of the people that are engaged in conflicts or hostilities? I mean, look at Afghanistan. They were notorious. They were known as what's the nickname for Afghanistan? The graveyard of superpowers.
Graveyard of civilizations. Yeah. And I've had this discussion with 4-star generals, with McChrystal and others. It's like, dude, you don't understand. So I could go through and tell you stories about how I told them, you need to go to their level of understanding, not ours. Don't project our culture and our beliefs on them. It's not going to work. It never works. But that's another story. But yes, to your point, we tend to dictate without understanding context. So this is why I'm a Reagan guy. So Bud McFarland taught me this is the master stroke of Reagan. Reagan would always say, I don't want to know about the policies. I want to know about the man. I want to know about how the man thinks. And so Bud told me he would do these big books on individuals and culture. It's like, this is why he thinks the way he does. This is the way you should approach it. So Reagan would go in to negotiate with a fundamental understanding of the issues and culture that guy in front of him is going to be thinking about. And so we don't do that. So until you understand Putin is not going to change, and you need to understand why Putin says what he does, and pretending that, we just throw some more things in Ukraine is going to collapse Putin. No, it's not. No, it's not. Putin is not weak. It's like, I'm not a Putin guy. I'm just, I was like, I have to defend myself constantly just simply because I reflect the situation as it is, not what the neocons and the American media want it to be. Oh, Putin's. How many times have you heard Putin's on his deathbed? Putin had he's wearing the pins. Like, I think it's Joe Biden just saying. But
it's
anyway.
like Kim Jong-un was supposed to die. What? He was the most unhealthiest guy. He was supposed to die like 10 years ago. He's still alive.
Yeah, this is maddening. So I'm a realist. My job is to speak as best I understand it, the truth based on the facts I see. And the fact that the U.S. media ignores the media in Russia and Putin as a personality, we do it at our own peril because they perceive themselves as winning. The rest of the world, the BRICS countries, all see them as winning, and they see Biden and the West as losing. It is what it is. And no amount of U.S. media or UK media talk about cheerleaders for the Ukrainian issue. No amount of mainstream media trying to change the narrative is going to have an effect on the ground truth in Ukraine. It's not. So.
And that's why I love having you on, because it's not how you want things to be. It's how things are, and developing policies to take care of that situation. So so many failures all around. Tony, always enjoyed the conversation with you. Thanks for coming on the program, and can't wait to have you back on.
Thanks, Nick. I always enjoy the talk. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter @PAS Report.